Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning into today's Your Author program from Facebook and YouTube. My name is Leah Heller, Young Adult Librarian in the Teenscape Department of Los Angeles Public Library. And I am here with my colleague, Don Nishimoto, Young Adult Librarian from the Robertson branch of the Los Angeles Public Library.
It is our pleasure to host the Your Author series today. We want to take a moment to thank our generous donors, the Lenore S and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund, and the Library Foundation for helping the library bring these amazing author and illustrator programs to all of you.
Before we get started, we just want to remind everyone to please feel free to share your thoughts, comments, and ask questions using the comments on Facebook and YouTube anytime. Also, please email ecdepartment, ecdept@lapl.org to be entered into an opportunity drawing to win Mary McCoy's Indestructible Object.
Thanks, Leah. Now let's get into our program. We have today writer and librarian Mary McCoy. She'll be joining us to discuss her new, much anticipated young adult novel, Indestructible Object. Mary's work won the Prince Honor in 2019, and she's contributed to On Bunker Hill and the 1947 Project, where she wrote about Los Angeles's notorious past. Her work can also be found on the LAPL blog, where she shares quizzes on everything from tarot resources to which chess grandmaster best fits your personality.
Hi, I liked that
introduction
so much. I also liked that you said my book was much anticipated.
But it's true. These are facts.
Mary, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. We can't wait to learn and know more about you, your creative process, and your work bringing to life the book Indestructible Object. To start us off, can you tell us a bit about your publishing journey?
Sure. It's funny. It actually started about 10 years ago, like almost to the day today. Because that's when I finished the first draft of the book that would be my first published book, which was called Dead to Me, which was like an LA mystery that was set in the 1940s. And so since then, in that 10 years since then, I've published 4 books. And the thing that's kind of interesting about the publishing journey is even though I finished that first draft of a book in 2011, it didn't get published until 2015. And so when people talk about a publishing journey, it's like a publishing marathon. I remember someone once told me they're like, pack a lunch. And
Thank you.
That's awesome. So we were hoping, I feel like it would probably be helpful for our guests today. We'd love to hear you read one of your favorite passages from this book.
Sure. Just to give a little bit of it's funny, I haven't received my finished copies of the book. I still have just like the advanced reader copy. So the one that you'll win, if you win one in the opportunity drawing, is a hardcover. But what this book is, it's set in Memphis, and it's about a girl who thinks she has her life entirely figured out. And she has everything just how she wants it. And then within the first probably 10 pages of the book, everything that she had settled and figured out, she loses, and she has to kind of rebuild everything. So she ends up, she's dumped, she's heartbroken, her parents are getting divorced. So she ends up starting this podcast to figure out whether love exists. And the section that I'm going to read is from pretty late on in the book, but it's kind of a nice little encapsulation of her, of what the whole book's about. I tell love stories all the time. People talk about love like it's secondary, sex like it's business. They act like romance novels are fluffy and the way people feel about each other is nice, but less important than wars or court cases or old men battling marlins at sea. Boil the whole of human existence down to its essence, and what you have is how we feel about each other and what we decide to do about it, even if it ends, even if we end up regretting it. What on earth are you thinking about? My dad asks in the checkout line at Target. You look like you're about to climb on top of a mountain and sing. My story, I say. It's a love story about confessional poets and thwarted playwrights, about sad rock stars and tattoo artists who are fighting with their kids, about messy bisexuals and untidy queers and evangelical Christians who make podcasts about art and girls who write beautiful songs in their bedrooms, about old lovers, new lovers, friends. I think it's a story worth telling because it's true.
It's so awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. Like, I love especially that section because there's so much heart throughout the entire book. But then there's also like the humor too. And I don't know, there's such a great sense of place. So thank you for sharing that.
That was a beautiful passage. Thank you. I really like how, no spoilers, I really loved how realistic it was. Like all the characters I felt were standing right next to me. So thank you. This is a multi-pronged question. Do you hear from your readers much? What are some questions or comments that you've enjoyed getting? And how do your fans contact you? Social media, email?
Yeah, some social media. I do occasionally get a message, through email, that kind of thing. It's funny. I find that when my books come out, there will sometimes be a word that just comes up again and again and again about that book. Like my first book, the word was gritty. My second book, the word was weird. And this book, the word that comes up again and again is messy. And it just seems to be in a lot of the reviews and the write-ups. And the feedback that I've been getting, that I've really been enjoying, is the people who have enjoyed the book because it's messy, because it feels like life. And I heard from a young reader recently who was like, I have read all 4 of your books, and I think this is the best one because it has the most feelings in it. And that made me feel really happy because it made me flash back to when I was editing my first novel, Dead to Me, which is like this very hard-boiled detective novel, and the main character is very like a cool, calm, collected, private eye. And I remember my editor at the time being like, could you give her some feelings? Could you make her have some emotion sometime about things? And I'm like, no, she's tough, she's hard. And I think as a human and as a writer, I've come a long way in that time. And so it made me happy that I'm like, yeah, I can write about feelings now.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Well, speaking of like great characters, so you have a lot of really great LGBTQIA plus characters in this book, and they all have so many different perspectives and sort of places that they're coming from. So we were wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you develop these characters.
Sure. So some of the representation that readers will see in this book, just to kind of go through who some of these characters are. There's Risa, who's a musician, and she's also, at one point, she just kind of, in exasperation, she's like, I'm a lesbian in the Bible Belt. I just need something in my life to be easy. And there's Max, who had identified as gay when he was younger, but has, during the timeline of the book, he's recently embraced a more sort of pansexual queer identity. And something that's going on is that his parents, who are both queer, had been very supportive when he originally came out, and they seem less supportive now in this part of the book. And then, like I said, Max's parents are queer, and one of his parents is non-binary. And then there's our main character, Lee. And Lee is bisexual, and she starts off the book as a fairly messy bisexual. other characters in the book even accuse her sometimes of enacting certain negative stereotypes, and they're not wrong. And the journey she goes on in the book is figuring out how not to do that and how to live a life that's authentic and honest. And so like one thing that was on my mind when I created the characters was there's kind of both inside and outside the queer community, there can be this very fixed mindset around identity. There's sometimes gatekeeping that exists that can make people question like whether they're queer enough to be like real, like the Velveteen Rabbit or something. Like you have to be exposed to scarlet fever before you're allowed to, be real. And then second, some of that gatekeeping can make people feel pressure to like hold on to identities that maybe once felt real and true to them, but that maybe don't feel true or right anymore. Which is a complicated idea to wrap your head around. Like on the one hand, you should believe people when they tell you who they are. But on the other hand, it's also important to understand that sexual identity is something that can change over a person's entire life. And like those two ideas aren't mutually exclusive. So some people might call it messy, but I think to other people, it just feels like life.
No, definitely. That really, it comes out in the book very, very clearly. And I feel like for a lot of folks in like a lot of different marginalized communities, especially like understanding just like how fluid identities can be, I feel like it's really nice to see that sort of play out in this book. That's definitely one of the qualities that really, really like spoke to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Sorry, after that monologue, I have to hydrate. Sorry, I kind of went off.
I also loved how each of the characters, like there's no real side characters. You learn a lot and enough about each of the characters in this book. Like so many books, they have like kind of throwaway characters, but you don't have any of those. And that's, I don't know, that was one of my favorite parts as well. Like how each person is so unique, but they have similarities as well.
Thank you. Yeah, they all kept finding their way in, and I just kept wanting to spend more time with all of them. So yeah.
Awesome. How did you come up with the amazing music in your book and setting it in Memphis, which has a big music scene? How did you decide to set it there?
Well, I lived in Memphis when I was between the ages of 18 and 24, which are pretty formative years. Like that was the first time I was living away from home, living on my own, and really figuring out like what kind of person I wanted to be. And so Memphis was really important to me in that way. And also when I lived in Memphis, I used to be a musician. And so while I was living in Memphis, I played bass in alt country and punk bands. And just being involved in that music scene was really important to me too. And like Memphis is a town that really takes care of its musicians. I played music in other cities that I've lived in, and I remember, them being like, we'd play a set and they'd be like, here are 3 drink tickets. That's your pay for the night. And in Memphis, we got paid. I was partially living on that money, and I wasn't even good. And it was a great community to be a part of. And a lot of that Memphis music was very much on my mind while I was writing this book. Like I was thinking about the bands that had been around when I was there, like the Grifters and the Subteens. And then I was also thinking about the Memphis singer-songwriters who are like really making great art today, like Julian Baker.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's like a ton of like great music references. So I'm glad that you represented Memphis for that. So like another aspect, like this is not just for this book, but for really like across all of your books, they all have like these very different approaches to storytelling. Like in Camp So-and-so, there's sort of like that theater drama structure. In I, Claudia, the story is told as like a recollection. And in an indestructible object, you incorporate like this podcasting dialogue. And I'm wondering, like, how do you decide like what structure or device you use in each book? And like, how do you decide to tell the story in each of your books?
It's funny. I think when I think about my writing, I think I would describe myself as a playful writer, mostly because I'm just, when I'm writing a story and I'm trying to crack it and figure it out, I feel like I'm just playing with things and tinkering with things. And the thing that I'm trying to do more than anything else is be interesting. And I think I like reading stories that are like that. And it's fun for me to do something that's playful and interesting structurally when I'm writing a story. So that's how the podcast scripts came in there. I thought it would be fun to do, and I wanted to see if I could get it to work. And that's the other, I think a lot of it is when I do those kinds of things, I don't know if it's going to work or not. So it's, it's like a dare that I've made to myself.
It's such an interesting response, because I'll say it definitely works for me. I realized that whenever the writing would switch over to the podcasting dialogue, that like internally I was sort of like filling in a lot of the blanks, so like when you listen to podcasts, often there's a lot of like production fills, and I realized that my mind just starts to like fill in all those blanks as soon as like the text changed. It's a little like, when sometimes like authors write a text message chain, and all of a sudden like it's a slightly different context, but then the reader's brain kind of fills in these different blanks. So I thought that was a really, really great idea.
Yeah, I want to hear what like the music that people would put in the soundtrack.
Right.
In the score, yeah.
Maybe, well, that'll be like another way for people to reach out to you. They can reach out with like playlist ideas.
Compositions.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
I had a quick follow-up, veering off a little, but do you listen to playlists or anything in particular when you write books?
I do when I'm thinking about books. Like I'll make playlists, and then I'll go for a run, and I'll just kind of think while I run. But when I'm writing, I need silence. Like I like to just be in a quiet, still area and nothing on.
Awesome. Thank you. So can you share with us a little about your workspace? Is there anything that has to be present for you to be able to work? And did quarantine change your habits or space?
Quarantine's been, I'll say this. I got my editorial letter, which is the letter that after the book had sold, my editor at Simon & Schuster wrote me this 9-page letter that said, here's everything about the book that I'd like you to work on changing. And I received that letter, I want to say like March 28th of 2020, which was a hard time to get a letter like that and a hard time to be working on a deadline. But it ended up being like a pretty nice escape, because the thing about this book, it's a hangout book. It's a summer book. It's a book where people are just running around town and thinking about love and art, and it was a good escape. So I found that during quarantine, having a deadline worked really well for me. I was able to write and sit down and do that. Trying to do something new though, just trying to be creative in a first draft kind of way has proven to be a little more challenging. So I'm starting to crack something new, but it's been hard.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm still hung up on they were sending you letters at like March 28th. The weeks prior to that, I'm just very impressed that they're like, gotta stay focused. I gotta figure out what direction this book is going to go in. So
that's a good point. Like maybe give it a month, give it a little bit.
I think my editor told me that it was kind of an escape for her as well. So yeah.
That's awesome. sort of, I don't know if you can talk about this, but like, do you have another project like in the works right now? Do you have something that you can talk about?
It's kind of too soon to say because
Yeah.
I don't even quite know what it is yet. I will say this. I think it might be a mystery.
Nice.
I don't know. My brand is all over the place. I can't just write one kind of book and stay in that genre. I have to hop all over the place.
Well, that sort of like relates to like what I was thinking about was like, so when you do write, like, do you ever think about like someone for your work? Like, do you actually think about like a target person or reader or audience?
Something I think about, the writer Kazuo Ishiguro, he said one time when he's writing, he's like, in the end, what stories are is me saying, like, this is how it feels to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does it feel this way to you too? And when I read that, that resonated really strongly with me. That's what I feel like I'm doing when I write. So I don't have necessarily an ideal person in mind, but I think I'm always asking in my writing, like, are we connecting here? Does what I'm saying feel true to you? And yeah, and is what I'm saying interesting?
Well, I wonder if like a related thing is like, do you find that you have, I don't know, maybe, how to phrase this, but like, do you have different sorts of readers reaching out to you or responding to each of the different books? Because earlier you mentioned like, oh, someone had read all of your books and this one was their favorite. But I'm wondering if there's like variations from like book to book.
I think so. I mean, the book that I think that I get the most feedback from and the most engagement from readers is my second book, Camp So and So, which is set at a summer camp, and it has like some fantasy and horror elements. I hear about that one a lot, and it's funny, that book came out in 2017, and it's still like it's coming out in paperback next year. So it's coming back on paperback like 5 years after it originally came out, and so it makes me happy to see, something that I wrote have life like that. And yeah.
I love that you write different genres because you're always unexpected. Because like there's many YA authors, it's like, okay, it's a mystery, but you're always a surprise. Because I don't like to look at the jacket, I just like to read it, and I don't like to like look ahead to anything. So I love being surprised every time.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. Just like yeah, my genre is surprise.
And have you encountered any resistance to your books?
I got some stories, man. It's funny, like with my previous books, I would occasionally get like little isolated pushbacks about like, oh, the language is a little salty, or someone accused me of having a gay agenda. But it's funny, I've gotten quite a bit more of it with this book, with Indestructible Object. In fact, someone on Book Riot actually wrote an article about like, man, I was reading Mary McCoy's Indestructible Object and I was loving it. And I just thought to myself, this book is going to get murdered on Goodreads. And the article was the 8 things that are, there was a list of things that books can do that will just annoy readers or make readers upset. And because I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler for anyone who's watching, but the main character, Lee, is like, she's a flawed main character. And this one of the specific flaws, like it comes out eventually that she is cheated on her ex-boyfriend while they were together. And that is something like a lot of the reviews have been like, she's toxic and she deserves to have a bad life. And it's interesting to me because I think when a book is about a flawed female character who is her arc in the story is acknowledging the harm that she's done and trying to make amends and trying to figure out how to be a better person. But I think there are some people for whom that kind of flaw, particularly in a female character, will result in you know what, she needs to be punished more. And so that's been interesting feedback. The nice thing is, I mean, it doesn't really get to me. Once I've published a book, once it's out in the world, it's not really mine anymore. It's, and reviews that people write aren't for me. They're for them and for their friends. And so it's not something that I take personally, but it's been interesting to notice on this one because the feedback has been a little bit more divisive.
That's really intense. And one of the things I love about this book is that your characters are so real. Like, these things happen. So I know a lot of authors do not read their Goodreads comments. So do you read it just once, or do you kind of go back every once in a while to read some Goodreads?
I'm not supposed to. I do read them sometimes though.
Because they can be kind of scary.
Or, what I'll do is I'll check periodically and I'll be like, oh, that one is, that one, it looks like that's new and it has a high score. So I'll look at it. If it's bad, I don't look at it.
Okay,
that's a good rule.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten a review where you're kind of like, oh, either like you learned something from it, or it sort of like presented like some observation that you're like, oh, I didn't thought of that before?
Oh, totally. Those are the worst kinds of negative or critical reviews to receive. The ones where you're like, they're right. No, I've read reviews that I'm like, they totally have my number on that. And I think if I look back on maybe not Indestructible Object, I don't have quite enough space and distance from it to look at it with that sort of keen, objective eye. But my first 3 books, I can see the weak spots in all of them. And there are things where if I went back now, there were things I would do differently. The other weird thing, though, is if I went back, I wouldn't be able to write any of those books anymore. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not that writer anymore. And so they have to kind of exist in the world as imperfect objects that, because I just don't have access to that anymore.
That's such an interesting observation. Like, I'm thinking about like how in music, you can write something at 24 and then you'd be 42 and still playing that song, but you can find a way to reinterpret it. But with writing, it really is like, that's, it's almost like an artifact of the time. Do you ever feel like you would revisit maybe themes or ideas that you may have visited in earlier writing?
Yeah, I mean, the book that I was very, cryptic about that I'm working on now, it's something that I've tried to work on. I've tried to write some version of it 2 or 3 times in the past, and it's never quite worked out. And the plot has been different, and the genre has been different, and the themes have even been somewhat different. But I feel like it's the same book. It's kind of set in the same world, and so it'll be interesting to see if this time I can crack it. And going back to a mystery book, that's kind of what I started off doing. It's the first thing I ever did, and so I'll be interested to see how that turns out and how the kind of writer I am now interacts with that genre.
Yeah, I feel like I'm very, very eagerly anticipating this now.
I have a quick follow-up question, Paulette. Do you work on one book at a time, or do you work on multiple books at a time?
Yeah, usually one at a time. I talk to writers who always have, 10 different ideas brewing, and there might be working on 2 or 3 projects at a time. I've always been like, I have at most 2 ideas, the one I'm working on and the on deck idea. And sometimes I don't even have an on deck idea. But I've never had a long period of time without an idea. Like, I have very few idea vacuums.
That's awesome. I feel like I'm always looking forward to your next book coming out, and there's not that much time in between them. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know how long it will take me to write. That's the other thing. It's kind of unpredictable. Some of my books I have written fairly quickly. Others have taken a long time. And Indestructible Object is one of my quicker ones. I think I wrote a draft of it in about 8 months, which is pretty fast for me. And, and then I spent most of 2019 writing it, and then it sold. And then I spent most of 2020 editing it. And so, yeah, we'll see if what I'm working on now is a quick book or a hard book. I think it took, when I wrote Camp So-and-so, it took me over 2 years to write it. And I mean, the book itself is about 100,000 words long. I have a document of every part that I cut out of it, and it's also 100,000 words long. That was a book that just had a lot of dead ends, and like things where I would write something and it wouldn't work out, and then have to go back to where it went wrong and then try it again.
Like, do you find that you're like editing out less writing these days, or is it kind of the same situation?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I mean, I, Claudia was a similar situation. There was a lot that I edited out, and mostly because that book was too long. I, Claudia is a modern retelling of the Robert Graves book, I, Claudius, which has a very memorable narrator because he's an unreliable narrator and he's very long-winded, but has no self-awareness about how long-winded he is. And so I had, Claudia has a bit of that in her narrative style, but for a young adult audience, I always try to be respectful of my readers' time, and I don't want them to indulge me this whim. And so I think I cut, 20 or 30,000 words out of I, Claudia, just because I was like, this is a digression. It's a funny digression, but it's
I feel like that's you need to have like the DVD director's comment, or like, what do you call it, like the extras. That you can, when you republish the book, you can put the extra stuff in the back.
Yeah. I saved those documents of everything that I cut because, sometimes it can be a little, I'm less precious about my writing now than I was when I think early on. Every time I would cut a paragraph, I'm like, oh no, but this is too good. And so I would just put it in this document so that even though it was gone, it wasn't really gone. I could go back and get it if I felt bad about it later. And I still do that, but I almost never go back to those documents.
Well, you never know. It's good to have it just in case.
Yeah.
So we're all teen librarians. Leah and I, we're both teen librarians, and so I imagine that there actually are some teens in our audience today. I know that several of the teens that I work with are aspiring writers. We've talked quite a bit about process. I'm wondering if you have any sort of tips or sort of like words of wisdom that you would offer to whether it's an aspiring writer or any sort of young creative mind.
Yeah, I do. So the time in my life when I was a musician in Memphis, I hadn't wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a writer, and writing wasn't going very well for me. I had a lot of self-doubt about it. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And so what I did was I kind of put writing aside a little bit, and I put my creative energy somewhere else. I think the character of Max in Indestructible Object there's a little bit of me in his way of being out in the world. Like, he calls himself a dilettante, and Lee's like, that's not a compliment. Like, that's not a nice word. And he's like, no, it's a good word. It's a word that means you're moving through the world being fascinated by everything. And you're taking your creativity and putting it out in a lot of, like, Lee's the opposite. She's super focused. She's, her creativity is all focused in one direction. And for some people that works. But I think that if I tried to keep, banging my head against the door of writing, I would have burnt out on it. And instead, you know what, I put it aside, and writing was still there waiting for me when I was ready to come back to it. And in the time in between, I had all these amazing experiences. Basically, I'd gone out into the world and had a lot of stuff to write about.
I love that idea of just being very open to like whatever the creative impulses may be, like even if it may not be like the sort of like form that you initially think of it as being. Thank you. That's really, really great.
Something else that I think is good is like that having an expansive mindset about things. Like, you might tell yourself, like, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. But I think if you tell yourself, like, I'm not great at this, but if I practice it, I can get better at it. That helps your creativity too. Like, I've always thought of myself as I would just say I'm a terrible artist. I can't draw at all. And this past year, I did like Inktober. And so I started doing all these little doodles and drawing all the time. And I was like, you know what? I'm getting better at this. And I think that's a good attitude to have about creativity as well.
That's really, really great advice. Thank you for sharing that, Mary.
Yeah, thank you. I have another random question. So, everyone, beautiful cover, exquisite cover. Again, please, definitely try to win a book because they are signed copies, which is super awesome. But my question is, do you get to decide or help on the covers of your books? Do you get like okays? Do you get to choose? And you were saying how Camp So-and-so is coming out in paperback. Did you get any say on that cover? Is it different?
Yeah, I have all kinds of stories about my covers. Because the answer is yes and no. I, of course, don't get to design my own covers. No one would want that. But I have gotten to have feedback on them. And I found that, if you get a cover, the original cover that I got for Camp So-and-so, I wish I had one handy that I could show it. The original cover design that I got for Camp So-and-so is very close to what ended up being published, what ended up being on the cover. But the original had this kind of like horror, sort of dark, gloomy atmosphere. And I was like, you know what? This book has some fantasy elements in it too. I think if you just go back to your publisher and say, I don't like it, they're like, well, sorry. But if you go back and say, hey, could you just make this a little weirder? Like, could you put some fairy lights in the background? And could you make the raven wearing like an amulet or something? Just to signal those little things. And my publisher was really receptive to that. And for this cover, for Indestructible Object, the feedback, my editor wrote to me and she said, can you tell me, what does Lee look like? And that kind of thing. So I wrote out a description. I had actually recently been to Memphis. So I sent her a bunch of pictures of Memphis, including like a coffee shop that's similar to the one that's described in the book, and like different bookstores and record stores that they go to. And but I was like, for how she looks, I said, do you know there's a musician named Sharon Van Etten? And I was like, I think that the main character looks like teenage Sharon Van Etten. And then what they did was they hired an illustrator. Her name's Beatriz Ramo. She lives in Spain, and she has done a few other young adult novels. She did James Bird's book, The Brave, and her work is just stunning. And yeah, so it was neat to be a part of the design process, even though I couldn't have predicted the end result. And I'll tell you, when I saw this cover, I was just floored. So happy with it.
It is a really stunning cover. Thank you. I think we are taking some audience questions. I'll do the first one, I guess. Brady asks, what's the most Memphis thing in the book?
Oh, the most Memphis thing in the book. Gotta think about that. It might be there is a moment where they have to go to a train station and there's an impromptu performance by some street musicians. And it is based on kind of an impromptu group that they came together as a prank to not win a battle of the bands. And I saw them in Memphis in 20 years ago. And it was just like this free jazz freak out with like a saxophone and guitars and performance art, and like someone shaved their beard off into a sink basin and there was a leaf blower. That's Memphis.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there are any other audience questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat. We'd definitely love to hear your questions. Yeah, I've only been to Memphis once, but I absolutely love the city. I imagine that there will be a day when we will be able to like travel very freely and such. But do you have any sort of like recommendations of like absolutely like these are the places that you have to go, or things that you have to do when you go to Memphis?
You have to spend some time in Midtown. Midtown it's the neighborhood where the book is set, and a lot of real locations in there. So you have to go to Burke's bookstore. Yeah, there's a lot of independent bookstores in Memphis that are great. Burke's is right there in the Cooper Young neighborhood where Lee lives. Goner Records is there, and you have to go to Goner. Goner Fest is happening again this year. It's like this really great music festival that's in Memphis. It's in September every year. I think they actually just released some more tickets for it. So it's happening in person. But if you can't go to Memphis, you can also they're doing it virtually as well. And so that's something wonderful to do. And what else is a good Memphis thing to do? Definitely go see some live music while you're in Memphis. There's always something going on. And yeah, and eat some barbecue. Or if you're a vegetarian, there's this place called, it's in Cooper Young. I think there's actually there's a scene in the book where they go there. It's a restaurant that used to be a beauty salon. So all the tables are set, like they left all the barber stalls installed, and there's like those little things that they put down over your head, the bonnets that are still in the walls and stuff. Yeah, go to the Cooper Young neighborhood.
I really liked all the food descriptions. I really love diners, and I haven't been to a restaurant in I don't know how long, so that was really nice to read. Thank you. Oh, well, we have comments if you'd like to. Oh yeah, Diane asks favorite food or drink when in Memphis.
Biscuits. Yep, going to there's this kind of restaurant that you can go to in the South, and what you order there is like the meat and three. So you get your entree and then your three sides. And your three sides are vegetables, but your vegetable could be macaroni and cheese. Your vegetable could be cornbread. So going to a diner and getting a meat and three is pretty good.
And all the sweet tea. I wanted to drink all that sweet tea.
Yeah, there's.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Diane. And I'm glad you like the band posters. I've got The Cure and Game Theory and Psychedelic Furs. Just
one other Memphis question. They have I forget what it's called. It's like there's the Bass Pro Shop that's like sits inside of the pyramid.
yes.
Or like what is that building called?
Let me tell you about the pyramid.
Yeah, can you? I was hoping that you know the story about this, so please.
It's a I don't know. It's a cursed space. They build it as kind of an event space, but it has very bad acoustics. So when I lived in Memphis, I would go see concerts there, and then there was also they would kind of do sort of traveling installations there. So a job that I had when I lived in Memphis, the Titanic exhibit came through where you could go on this audio tour and see artifacts from the ship. And I was the volunteer manager for that exhibition. So I would go down to the pyramid every day, and it was so busy. Everyone just wanted to see all the Titanic stuff. And I never got to see any of it because I was too busy like winding up the headphones and trying to charge them. And so, yeah. And then a few years ago, Bass Pro Shop like bought the pyramid. And I think the city of Memphis was somewhat happy to unload it because it's a weird space on the inside. So now it's a Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah, I've heard stories about like this, or the different decorations. I guess that's one way to put it that they have in the store. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I've never been inside the Bass Pro Shop version. I have too many memories of the Titanic.
I really want to visit this town. My last question, I always think of books, sorry, I'm trying not to cough, as either a thick soup one has to dredge through or a cold glass of water that one feels going down, and it's refreshing. And your books are always delicious glasses of water to me. And I know you were telling us that you have a project you can't talk about. Fair enough. Do you have any genres that you'd love to tackle? Like, do you have any favorite genres that you read that you think, I wouldn't mind writing in that?
This isn't really a genre, but I have never, I have never published a book that was for adults. And I've also never published a book that was for, that was for kids, like a middle grade series or a chapter book series or something. Something like that would be interesting to write. So, but I only have one idea at a time, so I have to wait until I have the on-deck idea.
That would be very fun. Thank you.
And I will say this, the book that I'm writing right now, I haven't figured out yet whether it's YA or whether it's a book for an adult audience. So I think the further I get into it, the more that will become clear.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So still, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. I think what we'll do right now, if you're up for it, Mary, we want to try some rapid fire questions, kind of like this or that sort of thing. So you can get your, release the creative juices. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So skinny French fries or thick cut wedges?
The skinny ones. You need the crispy. Without the crisp, there's nothing.
True. Dark chocolate or white chocolate?
Dark chocolate.
OJ or apple juice?
They're fine. They're both
You know.
fine.
Yeah.
I have no
Honestly, like I had the same response. I was like, I don't know. Sour cream or guacamole?
I'm not a great fan of either, which is, I think, a horrible. I feel like being an LA person, I am obligated to like guacamole, and I'm just not an avocado person.
We will let this one pass. That's fine.
Okay, I know.
All right.
It's a character failing.
No. Don't be so hard. This one's the important one. Pie or cake?
Pie.
All right. Iced tea or iced coffee?
Iced tea.
Iced tea.
Yeah. Just for drinking hot.
Right. Would you rather be able to eat anything that you wanted or be able to predict the future?
Eat everything I wanted. Yeah. I don't want to know what's gonna happen.
I got the food thing going. Yeah. Would you rather walk on the moon or be able to walk barefoot anywhere?
Oh, look, Hobbit, definitely.
Yeah, I like that he had a very specific image of like what this like walking barefoot would be.
Yeah.
So awesome. Very on brand, seeing that this is a library program. Would you rather spend every day eating the same thing or spend every day listening to the same song?
I do kind of eat the same thing every day, at least for breakfast and lunch. It's very sad. Just if I don't have to think about it in the morning, I just kind of, yeah.
But would you rather do that, or?
No, I want to listen to different music every day. So, and I'm clearly fine eating the same thing every day. So.
True. Okay. Would you rather only being able to speak to a translator or only be able to speak the truth every time you spoke?
The truth.
I think that too is also very on brand for indestructible object.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last two. These are going to get even more and more important. VHS or Laserdisc?
VHS.
Last one. This is sort of like a three-fer. Records, CDs, or cassettes?
Records.
Records. Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Records used to be cheap. You could go to like a used record store and you could like build up your entire vinyl collection because they only cost like a couple of dollars. And now now that they're kind of these collector's items, they're super expensive now, but I still buy them anyway.
Right. And they're also great as like art pieces. Right?
They are. Oh, I don't know if either of you experienced this. So this year when Amoeba Records was closed, they had these samplers that they would put out on vinyl, and you could join their record club, and they would send you like this sampler that their staff had put together. The vinyl is like really heavyweight and it's beautiful, and then all the cover art, I can't even do justice to how beautiful it was. So I feel like I got these very special collections of records, and it's a little way to kind of also support Amoeba Records during the pandemic.
Wow, I did not know about that. That is very
I
cool.
think they're still doing it too.
Good to know.
So,
Yeah, I feel like I missed out on that. Oh, all right. Well, thanks for sharing that one too.
Ooh.
A middle grade mystery book based around the artifacts of the Titanic. Could. Oh, and you know, Stacey Lee, who is a wonderful writer, she just had a book come out about the Titanic. I'm like suddenly blanking on the title.
Yeah, I can see the cover too.
Yeah, I can see the cover.
Yeah.
Luck of the Titanic.
Huh?
Right.
Luck of the Titanic.
Luck of the Titanic. Yeah, and her historical fiction's always so wonderful. So yeah.
But it's not middle grade.
It's not middle grade. That's true. It's still.
Well, thank you for the rapid fire responses, and both y'all apple juice. No, just kidding. But let's see. So thank you, Mary, and everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. The library's next Your Author program will be Thursday, July 23rd at 4 p.m. with author, educator, and artist John Parra as he presents his book, Waiting for Biblioburro. John's work has garnered numerous awards, including 3 Jura Belpré honors, 2 Golden Kite Awards and a Christopher's Award. His commercial clients include National Geographic, PBS, and Boston Children's Hospital. Raised in Santa Barbara, John and his wife currently live in Queens, New York. Those attending the virtual program, again, will have an opportunity to win a free book. Oh, you're muted.
That didn't happen. Thanks, Lear. And we hope that you all have joined our summer reading challenge. If you haven't, you can still go to lapl.org/summer to register. There's also an easy free app called Beanstack where you can register. And if you're looking for something fun that will get you or your family to move around and to be outside to explore nature around your home and neighborhood, make sure you join the LA BioBlitz Challenge. We need your help to photograph and share your observations of wild species of animals, plants, and insects on an app called iNaturalist. Your participation will support our city's effort in protecting wildlife and their habitats. You can begin today by going to the website, lapl.org/BioBlitz. That's BIOBLITZ. Or pick up a game card at an open LAPL branch, or just hit that link that is right on the screen. So thank you all for attending our virtual Your Author program, and we hope to see you all on July 23rd.